Today's video is brought to you by the novel 9/10.
Our passion for liberty and truth is unmatched. AMTV contributor Topher Morrison.
Hey everyone, welcome back to AMTV News. I'm your anchor Topher Morrison. Last night, Twitter was a trending. Media questions for Dzhokhar. Number 1. Do you know your name is worth 95 points in Scrabble? Number 2 for Dzhokhar. Would you mind holding this pressure cooker? The third question. Is it true you didn't build that? Number 4. How do you feel about being treated at Beth Israel Medical Center? Number 5 is a classic. Boxers or briefs? And number 6 is mine. What is your definition of blowback? This is surprisingly the topic not covered within the spectrum of current national debate over the Tsarnaev brothers, which runs the gamut from bald-faced false flag to gross incompetence on behalf of top-secret America and authorities. This America of which I speak, of course, is our post-9/11 heritage, the over 854,000 people with top security clearances, the over 1,200 government agencies, and nearly 2,000 private companies working in counterterrorism, homeland security, and intelligence in over 10,000 locations across the United States. I am speaking about the dozens and dozens of building complexes built or under construction since September 2001, together occupying the equivalent of almost 3 Pentagons or 22 U.S. Capitol buildings. In other words, 17 million square feet of, sorry, we can't protect you, but we sure as hell can circumvent your rights. As Americans around New England waved their nation's flag proudly after the announcement of the last suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing was caught, in hindsight, all it signaled was the end of not an epic manhunt, but the end of what was clearly a police state dry run, and the beginning of the end of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's chances at an impartial trial, and therefore, in some way, his rights to due process. I, for one, enjoy living in a soft target nation. Think about it. Imagine living in a country without them. They often talk about the price of freedom. April 15th, 2013 was that price. 3 dead, 170 wounded. But what makes the price of freedom, in my mind, too high is how American foreign policy, much like our central bank, inflated the cost. A media question on last night's trend asked, why? Who radicalized you? Some have already answered that question for themselves, looking through a brief history of FBI's role in entrapping would-be terrorists in what is innocuously referred to as sting operations.
Since the tragedy of 9/11, numerous crazies and low-level copycats have engaged in criminal behavior which they hoped would result in the deaths of innocent Americans and somehow advance their cause of jihad. If you ask the leadership of the FBI, most of whose field agents are tireless, dedicated, Constitution-supporting professionals, it will tell you that the FBI, has foiled about 17 plots to kill Americans during the past 10 years. What it will not tell you is that there have been 20 foiled plots, and of them, 3 were interrupted by members of the public. The 17 that were interrupted by the feds were created by the feds.
Look no further than the lulling sense of success in Canada yesterday as the FBI once again beat its chest after thwarting its latest terror cell and washing away for the general public any ounce of doubt our federal government is an effective team. Despite the well-documented history of domestically staged terror foils by even the mainstream media, the international angle is only now being revealed. Who radicalized, indeed, the Tsarnaev brothers? So let's grant our government their preferred narrative in all of its bizarre glory. Forget the private military contractors, forget Glenn Beck's Saudi handlers, an FBI relationship lasting 3 to 5 years, forget the call for indefinite detention, forget all of it. We learned the term blowback since 9/11, defined as the unintended consequences of clandestine operations abroad. When President Jimmy Carter and Zbigniew Brzezinski created the Mujahideen in the 1970s, who knew then its ringleader, Osama bin Laden, would be held responsible for the destruction of 2 of New York's tallest buildings? Likewise, who in Boston could have ever predicted a similar sect of Mujahideen funded and trained by our government during the 1990s in Chechnya would result in the radicalization of one of their prodigal sons, resulting in the second Boston Massacre on Patriots' Day, 2013. But Topher, why would we care about the Northern Caucasus? One word, and it's getting old. Oil. John Daly, writing for oilprice.com, reaches deep into the last century's history of one of the most violent places on earth and examines Boston, the Tsarnaev brothers, oil, and the Chechen connection. Daly notes, for possible answers to why these two in particular would commit this atrocious act, one must look beyond the present and delve into Russia's and the USSR's past policies towards Chechnya, and since 1991, U.S. policy in the Caucasus, which since the 1991 implosion of the USSR had a single focus: the exploitation of the Caspian's massive energy reserves. Chechnya, historically part of Iran until 1813 and the Treaty of Gulistan, was ceded to Russia and subsequently to the Soviet Union, which decimated the Chechen population after a mass vacation along the Gulag archipelago, courtesy of Stalin, creating an obvious enmity. After the Soviet Union crumbled in 1981, Moscow scrambled to hold on to Chechnya for reasons soon to be made clear. Moscow earned modest revenue from the Chechen high-grade crude, fees garnered from Azeri oil, which crossed 95 miles of Chechen territory via the Baku-Novorossiysk pipeline. But ultimately, Chechen independence rights, Daly, could lead to a significant potential loss of Caspian reserves once the seawaters and seabed were divided, if Chechnya aligned itself with neighboring Dagestan, where Tamerlan Tsarnaev visited for 6 months in 2011. Russia and Chechnya fought in two horrific wars, the first 1994 to 96, and the second from 1999 to 2009. By then, U.S. and British penetration of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan's energy sectors was complete during these conflicts. The Western Bloc took up huge positions in foreign direct investment in the region. Daly points out Dick Cheney observed the year before Vladimir Putin's appointment to Prime Minister, "I can't think of a time when we've had a region emerge as suddenly to become as strategically significant as the Caspian." By 2005, the Western Consortium attempting to cut Russia out of the Caspian energy loop achieved its goals, notes Daly. The Chechen conflict dovetailed perfectly, not only into Washington's plans to bog down the Russian military in a long, drawn-out conflict in the Caucasus, but provide Western energy companies with an alternative route as Chechnya was slowly ground down by the Russian military, oil that would have otherwise moved northwards to Russia, providing lucrative transit fees. Chechnya proved ground zero for both Western political and business interests. All of the above history, writes Daly, virtually unknown in the U.S., is deeply known to every Chechen. The shadow war between Moscow and Washington for the Caspian's energy riches saw Chechnya squarely caught in the middle, leaving the Chechen homeland virtually destroyed. Something to remember when reading the increasingly contradictory news reports coming out of Washington about the bloodshed in Boston by the Tsarnaev brothers, as the U.S. is hardly blameless about the carnage visited on their ancestral homeland. So-called insurgency in Chechnya was largely a covert CIA initiative. Rebel leaders Shamil Basayev and Al-Khattab were trained and indoctrinated in CIA-sponsored camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan, notes Michael Chostadovsky. Pakistan's ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, played a key role in organizing and training the Chechen rebel army. The ISI also played an instrumental role in supporting the Afghan Mujahideen, a Muslim paramilitary force that would eventually mature under the guiding hand of the CIA and others into the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. From Afghanistan to Dagestan, the last 40 years of foreign adventurism has now come home, yet again, to America. So what should San Francisco now fear from Libya's recently liberated hordes of Islamic militias? What new violent hornets might our machinations in Syria stir up? There couldn't possibly be a $10 billion oil pipeline signed in July of 2011 between Syria, Iran, and Pakistan, a pipeline that would propel their respective economies forward despite Western sanctions, could there? It's a key, unstated reason for Qatar to be so obsessed by regime change in Syria, to kill the pipeline. The same applies to Turkey, because this pipeline would bypass Ankara, which always has billed itself as the key energy crossroads between East and West, writes Pepe Escobar for RT. To answer what some might be asking, no, we don't blame America. We blame our government and its corporate praetorian. There's a difference. Capturing every corner of the alternative media, watch AMTV News Monday through Friday. Follow me on Twitter at AMTV News and like us on Facebook at Greenwave TV. Find my source material and more videos like these at amtvmedia.com and greenwave.com. Both are part of the AMTV network. This is AMTV, the voice of independence.